For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for more updates.
Did you know that at one time, the highest income tax slab was 99.75%? Did you know that under the Factories Act, previously, if you had a tiled toilet facility, you were penalized because the rules required that they be whitewashed? Hello and welcome to another edition of Capital Calculus. I am your host, Anil Padmanabhan. The bizarre examples of business rules that I cited in the introduction are from history. Worryingly, this legacy lives on. For example, the GST Council, which met recently, decided to lower the levy on food items sold in cinema halls to 5%. But there was a catch though. If you bundle this with the purchase of cinema tickets online, then it attracted a levy of 18%. Unfortunately, this is not a one-off. Recently, the government imposed a 20% tax collected at source on credit cards used on foreign tours. Will this growing over-enthusiasm to micromanage by tax authorities prove to be a dampener for the ease of doing business? Will it incentivize tax evasion? To understand this and more, we spoke to Ramesh Kailasham. He is the CEO of indiatech.org. It is a domestic lobby firm which works with homegrown tech companies. I began the conversation with the latest recalibration of GST levies, which on the face of it sounds bizarre.
Well, we have seen many such bizarre decisions, right? I mean, maybe somebody must have had a personal experience and they must have decided to vent it out somewhere. That's how these kind of examples come up. But yes, there are people on ground where because we keep interacting on a lot of such issues. I mean, you take the case like there was a decision on how roti is different from Malabar parota. Or for that matter, papads and fryums are different, or idli dosha batter mix in powder form is different from liquid form. And you also had the famous case of Karnataka bench of the advance rulings, which said that parotas should be subject to higher GST at 18%, unlike rotis, which should be at 5%. I think we went into too much of micromanaging in the process. It should have been one nation, one tax, but we started micromanaging to such an extent that we were looking for where is the value addition happening. I mean, like you are making a roti, it is fine, but you apply ghee on it, it becomes a paratha, and therefore from 5% shoots to 18%. I think we should not have gone to that level of, as I said, not only micromanaging, but extending government to that level. So minimum governance is what this government has often spoken about, but the way the GST interpretation of things have been going around, it looks like everybody is being treated as a different thing. And I think that is where I think the statesman-like approach of the government needs to step in now to say that, hey, this was meant to simplify life. I think we have gone too far micromanaging stuff. So, you take the case of, there's something we have been handling. You buy a non-AC bus ticket. A non-AC bus ticket is purchased by the poorest of poor. And they do inter-city or intra-city travel within the state and so on, run by the SRTC buses of the states. Now, the ruling says that if you stand in the queue offline, you get it at 0% tax because then you are poor. But the moment you buy it in an app, then you become richer. So therefore, you have to pay GST on it. So the same non-AC bus travel without the AC that you will travel will attract GST if you buy it on an app. Goes counter to the statesman-like approach that the government has taken on digital India, right? So I think there are a lot of such imbalances that we can see. And I see too much of micromanagement, which has to probably stop if we have to have a larger heart on this.
So Ramesh, the problem here is that this is a consensus decision in GST. So there is obviously politically bipartisan consensus on whatever they are doing, right? So is this a case of classic regulatory overreach?
See, I would say, I'm not commenting on the functioning of the GST Council, but if we were to dissect how the GST Council meeting happens internally, we do have many of the chief ministers holding finance ministry portfolio. But more often, the person who comes and represents there happens to be holding some ministerial portfolio, not in the nature of finance. Many of them participate in it because they have to represent their states. And ideally, at the end of the day, while there are issues where many of the states speak up, in many of the cases, it would be largely the person representing leaning on the council, the officers who are coming from the state. And more often, what is consensus may not be that every state stands up and says, "Hey, I'm voting for Malabar paratha to be treated this way over a roti." But largely, it would be consensus that one or two people would propose and the others would agree, and there is not too many people opposing anything, so it goes through. So, to your point, there are issues which are debated heavily. There are issues which are not debated, and I think in the rush to and there are cases, if you see most of the, if you use the term bizarre kind of issues, now many of the cases are questioned in courts and various other places. So sometimes we would also tend to see that the GST Council would try to ratify some of these decisions quickly so that it goes in favor of the government, that a local unit or a team unit which would have worked on it should not have an unfavorable next step in the court kind of proceedings. And one thing I think we also need to understand is, why is this micromanagement kind of a process coming in? Is the legacy was all the state taxes, the central taxes, those officers moved into the VAT regime, and that VAT regime has now taken as it is into the GST regime. While the GST regime from a government standpoint was more statesman-like, more to ease things and ease of doing business. But because the hangover of the VAT and the previous tax regimes continues, we are seeing this sense of too much getting into, needling into a lot of micro issues. And I think that is where we are seeing things falling between the cracks.
So, quick follow-up, two of them. One, doesn't it open the door for many more legal disputes? Secondly, it also raises the compliance burden very inequitably. Rich corporates probably can afford expensive lawyers, etc. But small enterprises will be squeezed trying to justify or challenge these kind of decisions.
Well, yes. I mean, most of these cases would lead to litigation. In fact, now we are seeing litigations even on who should be the consuming state. You have 3 states coming and landing at your doorstep saying, "Hey, your consumer came from my state. Your billing happened from my state, or the product which was consumed belonged to my state, and therefore, ideally, all the 3 states are now sending you show cause notices." So, and I would like to differentiate here. When we talk of ease of doing business, it does not matter whether you have got deep pockets and you're a big company, or you are a emerging MSME, or even a startup. It is an ease of doing business across the spectrum. Today's MSME may become tomorrow's big business. Are we stopping that part of ease of doing business in such a way that today, most of the time, the question is, are you converting your innovative business into an army of accountants and therefore becoming an accounting firm? Which is good news for accountants like me, but bad news for business per se, because the more you have compliance and more you have dependencies on accounting as such, then you're not doing business. And therefore, that is where we are hitting at the root of innovation. And that's a paradox, because you have the whole government machinery trying to promote innovation, trying to be seen as promoting things digital, trying to promote Indian startups and Indian entrepreneurship. You can't have these kind of situations coming where they begin to feel that, hey, it's actually tough to do business because I have to live through so many compliances. Right? You take the case of online travel, for example. Today, you can't sell a hotel in any part of the country unless you are present in all the jurisdictions in the country if you want to offer hotels across India. So all the states and UTs, you need to have a physical office, a physical GST number, 111 returns per month. I move away from being a travel entity to I becoming accounting firm. Right? I think that's not and was never the intent of the government, but it is what it is turning out to be at the grassroots level on the ground.
Clearly, it's a good idea going bad. This was meant to be the good and simple tax. However, now a mindset that dates back to the era of the license Raj seems to be steadily making a comeback.
Well, I mean, you can, I mean, whether you call it Babu Raj or rot is secondary. What is primary is to understand that you have a government which is trying to give a progressive outlook to the world and try to give a progressive outlook to the industry and seriously working in that direction in collaboration with states. And then you have a parallel approach. It is like, I mean, for the industry, I would say like you're being fed delicacies, sweets, and one bitter thing pill, right? So, and that bitter one is even more bitter than the whole delicacies that were served. So, I think we have to somewhere iron this out. The number of compliances are coming down on setting up business. I have always said this because I have set up factories in the past for various companies. And in ease of doing business, there are two aspects. One is ease of setting up business. I think we have done enough on helping people in ease of setting up business. And then the next phase comes when you conduct the business. I think we need to figure out ways and mechanisms to actually ease of conducting business in the country. That's the part where we now need to concentrate, because I think whatever work we have done fabulously on collaborating with the states, right from your land availability to your clearances to your environment clearance, and everything is now falling in place. And there is a center state, I would say, symphony that is working well. But I think post your factory gets set up, life after is what we need to fix fast, because people who are coming to you after setting up of that business aren't aligned necessarily in the statesman-like manner in which you welcomed them. So I think that mismatch has to be fixed quickly.
Ramesh is making a nice distinction. The difference between the ease of setting up a business and the ease of running one. I was curious to know whether the current turn of events was because the emphasis of tax law to target evasion as opposed to creating efficiencies so that taxpayers are incentivized to pay taxes.
Well, if you look at, and there's a chicken and egg situation, right? The government would say, hey, there are so many people who are trying to beat the system and defrauding the system, which is why we are going after good like yous. I mean, like you and so on. Our intent was never you. Our intent was those bad guys. And therefore, it opens a gate somewhere. And we have been trying from our end as India Tech, as a body which I represent, trying to give alternate suggestions on you can shut that hole or that door this way as well. You need not kind of whip the whole industry for it, which has worked in some cases. In other cases, it at least went into a deliberation mode. And it's a long exercise when you have to convince this way, because the paramount thing that always rides the taxman is where is the evasion happening? And therefore, because evasion happens, everybody is a crook, therefore. And therefore, everybody gets penalized. And I think one of the noble things that businessmen do is they are creating livelihoods in this country. I mean, we produce roughly between 1.7 to 2 crore children every year. We are the highest populated country. We don't have so many jobs. We have to create work opportunities for people. It is entrepreneurship and businesses that can take care and keep this country civil and going, and all the aspirations towards 5 trillion, 10 trillion economy. If we keep raising taxes and compliances, you are actually forcing a lot of people to look at ways and means to be out of that economy. And I think that is a fundamental parameter, I would say, because the more you increase compliance costs, not only are you increasing my cost of doing business, but you are also allowing, I mean, I'll give you an example in the internet space that I operate. Today, the global operators, whether Indian or foreign, domiciled abroad, through the internet can sell to the same customer that my companies domiciled in India, having permanent establishment in India, can sell to. But, however, the number of compliances which I have to do inside the territorial waters of India versus me operating in a boat outside the territorial waters of India are vastly different, which means that somebody in the internet world can sell without having to comply with any of the compliances because that's allowed to, which means there is a door open there for people to sell to this market. But if I'm selling in India, I have to comply with all of this. So the cost of compliance and the tax arbitrage is the price differential that my competition, which is domiciled outside, is already enjoying. And therefore, customers will always go for what is cheaper price, despite the fact that you are legally getting access to the same products. Nobody's selling anything illegally. But the tax has created an arbitrage in price in the internet economy. The tax has created an arbitrage of compliance cost in the internet economy. And I think those are the things that we need to seriously look at.
But Ramesh, this is exactly the point I'm making, that the entire principle of taxation is built on I believe, flawed foundation that everyone is corrupt, like you pointed out. But everyone is not corrupt. So don't we have space to actually acknowledge honest taxpayers, incentivize them, and thereby work the system differently?
Absolutely. I mean, why was the need to have, and this goes back to the point I started, right? We are going too micro on tax management. The fact that we can't be large-hearted between a parota and a roti also gives an example that, a roti is a roti. You add a ghee to it, there's a value addition. You can't shoot it from 5 to 18% and create another variant, right? So we can't be creating so many variants and micro. Administratively, this is a nightmare even for the department. You should have had a more simplified slab format. You do have slabs simplified, but within that same products, you have multiple variants. And I think somewhere there we have made it complicated.
In the final analysis, it is clear that over-enthusiastic tax sleuths are beginning to undermine the profound idea of one nation, one tax. Worse, it is beginning to spook Indian business. Also, it is also putting them at a disadvantage vis-a-vis their foreign counterparts. And increasingly, we are seeing legal challenges to the various tweaks that the government is undertaking, which in turn is further clogging up the judicial machinery. I guess this is the time for our over-enthusiastic tax authorities to curb their enthusiasm, as it were. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to Strat News Global on YouTube. Hit the bell icon so that you don't miss any updates. And please, to share your thoughts, ideas and suggestions with us. I'm available on Twitter at Capital Calculus. I'll be back next week with another episode. Till then, stay safe.